My husband texted, "I'm working late again tonight," and I replied, "Good," then secretly drove to bring him dinner at his office. When I arrived, the whole building was in darkness except for one room with its light on. I gently pushed the door open and saw Neve, my best friend, sitting on the desk, her shirt unbuttoned, and my husband leaning down to kiss her. Before they could say a word to beg, I quietly left and made a phone call. My name is Angela Martinez, 34 years old, CEO and founder of a brand design company. Someone who spent her entire career helping others define their image, but never imagined that one day I would have to redesign my own life. I live in Boston, running a small studio called Focal Point Designs, where I always tell clients, design with integrity. I believe in that, in work and in marriage. My husband, Waylon Martinez, is a hedge fund manager at Barrett and Company, financial group working with major investors. For 6 years, I thought I was lucky. Waylon was talented, magnetic, someone who made people believe in him. And my best friend, Nevaeh Sinclair, was his investment research assistant. I trusted Nevaeh completely. I used to joke, "At least if you're working late, my best friend's there to keep watch." I didn't know that joke would one day become the most bitter thing I ever said. One Friday night, Waylon sent me a photo. Him, Nevaeh, and a few colleagues in what looked like a tense office meeting, along with the message, "Working late again." I replied, "That's fine. I'll wait for you for dinner." A few minutes later, he texted, "Don't wait. I'll eat out." I smiled, thinking he was probably grabbing another greasy burger and a Coke, that kind of junk food I always worried about. Wanting to do something better, I decided to make him a healthier dinner. Kale salad and grilled salmon, the dish I had spent weeks perfecting to his taste. I thought I'd surprise him, the way I used to in the early years. I stopped by Whole Foods to pick up some dried lavender. The scent, he always said, made him feel peaceful, like home. Then I drove to Barrett and Company, carrying 3 portions of salad, one for him, one for Nevaeh, one for me. At the building, the security guard, an older man who recognized me, smiled and said, "Another long night for Mr. Waylon, huh, Ms. Angela?" I replied, half joking. "Seems like he's married to work more than to me." He laughed, swiped me in, and said, "Hope he's still there to enjoy what you brought." I smiled too, not knowing how prophetic those words were. The elevator took me to the 25th floor, executive level. The floor was dark except for a single room, with light seeping out from Waylon's office. I slowed my steps, the scent of lavender still lingering. I was about to knock, then froze. Inside, I heard soft laughter, then silence. I gently pushed the door open and saw Nevaeh sitting on the desk, shirt unbuttoned, and Waylon, the man I loved, leaning in to kiss her. What I felt wasn't pain, but a fall. The world went silent, except for the pounding of my heart. All the years of trust, the "I love yous," turned to dust. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stepped in, placed the food bag on a nearby table, and said calmly, "Beautiful." A perfect design of betrayal. Waylon jumped up, voice shaking. "Angela, you've got it all wrong." Nevaeh's face went pale as she scrambled to fix her shirt. I said nothing. I pulled out my phone, took a photo, instinctively, and turned to leave. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the steel panel. Messy hair, stiff lips, vacant eyes. I opened my phone and typed, "Project, rebranding my life." Then hit save. The elevator doors closed with a dry metallic click. I stood in silence, as if time had been sucked down with the slow descent. In the dim reflection, I saw a woman who, just minutes earlier, believed her husband was merely working late. A part of me had seen this coming. For 6 months, I ignored too many signs, or redesigned them in my head to make them more reasonable. I remembered a night when one of Waylon's colleagues, someone I barely knew, sent me a blurry photo. In it, Waylon was dancing with a blonde under shimmering party lights. Her face was unclear, but his hand on her waist was not. I asked him about it. He laughed dryly, not angry, just tilted his head and said calmly, sarcastically, "You're really getting paranoid, Angela." She's a client. The photo was taken mid-song. You want to destroy me over a blurry picture? His words silenced me. I doubted myself instead of trusting my gut. I even apologized, said I was just tired. Work was making me sensitive. He hugged me and said, "Don't overthink. You're everything to me." Now, in this cold space, those words echoed like the ruins of a flawed design. Every detail I thought perfect was now cracked. His late nights, strange perfume on his shirts, the meetings just with Neve I believed were work. I remembered that moment at his office door. I saw everything I had tried not to. And when he said, "Angela, you've got it all wrong," I cut him off. I didn't need to hear more. I placed the bag on the chair, voice calm and ruthless. "No need to pretend. Looks like you two are already full." I looked at Neve, the woman who once called me her closest sister, shaking as she fixed her shirt. I said with icy sarcasm, "Must be a special project for you two. Investing in betrayal?" Then I turned and walked away. Never looked back. The elevator doors shut behind me, and in that moment, I knew. Everything in my life was about to be redesigned, whether I was ready or not. I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly along the Charles River, letting Boston's cold wind slap my face, trying to rid myself of the cheap perfume that still lingered on his shirt. When the dashboard clock hit 11 p.m., I parked in front of the Liberty Hotel, a gray stone building that once was a 19th century prison, now a luxury hotel. They say it's a symbol of freedom reborn from captivity. I looked at the glowing brass plaque reading Liberty and whispered, "Perfect." The receptionist handed me the key to room 1207 and asked politely, "Will you need any additional services?" I replied, "No. I just need one night of silence." Once the door shut behind me, I sat on the bed and opened my phone. Dozens of messages from Waylon blinked like pulsing scars. "You misunderstood. Don't ruin everything. I'm just going through a rough patch. I love you." I read them all, oddly calm, like a client complaining about a flawed design I already knew was broken. I typed a single reply, sharp as a razor. "There's nothing to ruin. I'm just redesigning." Then I saved all the photos and videos into a folder titled Project Freedom and uploaded it to my personal drive. 1 minute later, I blocked his number. Silence filled the room. Thick, heavy, but strangely, I could breathe again. I stood up, poured myself a glass of cold water, feeling like I'd just drunk a gulp of courage. My silver MacBook sat open on the desk, screen blank, cursor blinking. I placed my fingers on the keyboard and started typing. Not a design plan for a client, but a relaunch plan for my own life. Divorce. Asset collection. Reputation protection. I paused, looked at those 3 short lines, then typed one more. The line that squeezed my heart, but also what I needed to see most. Let no one else define my worth. I clicked Save As, rebranding my life. On the screen, my reflection stared back. No tears, just the gaze of a woman plotting her rebirth. Boston's night was quiet, the only sound coming from distant traffic on Cambridge Street. I pulled the curtains open, staring at the faint yellow lights in the windows across the city. Part of the city was still awake, just like me, still alive, even though I'd just shattered. I opened my Design Flow playlist on Spotify. Soft jazz started playing, syncing with my heartbeat. I picked up a pencil, opened my sketchbook. On the blank page, I drew an open circle, a curve almost closed, with a small gap at the bottom. A space, just enough for light to enter. Beside it, I wrote, "Freedom doesn't lie in perfection. It lies in the courage to open." Then I closed the sketchbook, leaned back against the wall, and took a deep breath. I had lost a husband, lost a friend, but I had just reclaimed something more important, the copyright to my own life. I set the sketchbook down and leaned my head against the bed frame, letting the hollow space inside me slowly settle. But just a few minutes later, that calm gave way to a flooding loneliness. The luxury room, warm lighting, red wine, all of it only made me feel more alone. In 6 years of marriage, I had built a brand for us, for Waylon and Angela, but now only one half was still breathing. I picked up my phone, hesitated for a moment, then searched for the name Lydia Parker, my cousin, the one who always called me the only real big sister I've ever had. Lydia works in marketing at Landry Pharmaceuticals in Cambridge and was one of the few who still kept in regular contact despite my packed schedule. I hesitated, unsure if I should call. But before I could think further, the tears had already spilled, and my finger had already pressed call. On the other end came Lydia's voice. Warm, worried. Angela? Oh my God, why are you calling this late? I couldn't say anything for the first few seconds, only the sound of choked breaths, like every bit of pain I'd been holding in all evening was bursting out at once. Finally, I could only manage a few words. I caught them, Lydia. Waylon and Neve. A long pause followed. I heard Lydia take a slow breath, as if swallowing her anger on my behalf. Then her voice softened, yet took on a strange firmness. Sis, you're not going to fall. I know you. If you need to release all that energy, turn it into something meaningful. I laughed through my tears, a broken, bitter laugh. Something meaningful? You know what I want right now? Just to sleep for 3 straight days, Lydia responded, steady as ever. No. I have good news. Landry is looking for a partner to rebrand. They want a fresh, creative perspective. Not the same formula from big agencies. I'll recommend focal point designs. Send me your portfolio, not as a favor, because you're genuinely brilliant. I was quiet for a moment. The tears were still wet on my cheeks, but something else was rising. Hope. I looked over at my laptop still open on the desk, the screen reflecting my worn-out face, but my eyes were beginning to regain their light. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because I realized something simple. Among all this wreckage, someone still believed in me. Not because I was someone's wife, but because of who I was. I said, voice trembling, "Thank you, Lydia." I don't know what to say, Lydia replied softly. Don't say anything. Just keep being you, the woman who always turns ruins into her most beautiful designs. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. Jazz from the Design Flow playlist still played gently, blending with the ticking of the clock. I looked out the window. Boston still glowed, cars moving across the Longfellow Bridge like threads of light. In that moment, I understood. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays when everything falls apart. I closed my laptop and whispered to myself, "All right, Angela. Tomorrow, we start a new project." The next morning, Boston greeted me with the pale light of early spring. I looked at myself in the hotel mirror, hair neatly tied, beige blazer, face still bearing signs of exhaustion. But my eyes, they had changed. I was no longer a wife waiting for her husband to come home. I was a CEO preparing for the most important meeting of her life. I went to the office of Margot Palmer, the renowned divorce attorney in Boston's financial circles, dubbed the Ice Queen by the press. She had helped countless women reclaim control of their assets from powerful men. Her office was on the 18th floor, overlooking Boston Common, with tall glass windows and pristine white orchids lining the guest tables. When I entered, Margot didn't ask how I was or offer pity. She simply gave a faint smile, poured coffee, and slid it toward me. "Ms. Martinez, I've read your email summary. Now, tell me everything." The more detailed, the better. I pulled a USB from my bag, along with a few hotel receipts and a video from my phone. The evidence I had gathered that night. Margot put on her glasses, plugged in the USB, eyes fixed on the screen as images of Waylon and Neve appeared. Clear, undeniable. When the video ended, she took off her glasses, looked up, and said in a calm, firm voice, You did everything right. No outbursts, no self-destruction. You acted strategically. From here, I'll handle the rest. I nodded, feeling for the first time in days that I was no longer alone. Margot opened her notebook and asked, "Do you have any witnesses?" I replied, "Yes." Frank, the security guard at Barrett and Company. He saw them and gave me a copy from the internal camera system. Margot nodded, voice steady and firm. Good. I'll request a subpoena to legally confirm the validity of that footage. It will be accepted as valid evidence of adultery. She paused, opened her laptop, typed a few lines, and continued. Can you provide 6 months of bank and credit card statements? I nodded and handed her a file of accounting records I'd stored on my drive, a habit from years of managing project budgets. Margot skimmed through, then paused at one transaction line. NS Capital Transfer, $250,000. What's this? I frowned. I've never heard of NS Capital. We don't have any private investments. Waylon said all our funds were in Barrett. Margot narrowed her eyes, her gaze razor sharp. I'll look into it. Delaware is a common place for shell companies. If this is a private firm under his name, he's likely diverting assets in preparation for divorce. I went silent. That sentence made my heart sink. This wasn't just infidelity. He had planned to leave me, with a financial escape route in place. Margot looked up, her voice resolute. I'll have our legal team investigate immediately. Once I have answers, I'll contact you today. In the meantime, don't say a word to him. From now on, everything you do could become evidence. I nodded, picked up the cold coffee, and left the office. Outside, the Boston wind was bitter, whipping strands of hair across my forehead, but I felt more awake than I had in days. 3 hours later, while I was sitting in the lobby of the Liberty Hotel, my phone rang. It was Margot. Her voice came through the speaker, measured, cold. Angela, I've confirmed. There's a registered company named NS Capital LLC in Delaware, owned by Waylon Martinez. Over the past 6 months, he's transferred a total of $500,000 into its account. Your name is not on any of the filings. This is clearly an attempt to shield assets and avoid a 50-50 split. I laughed. A thin, dry sound echoing in the quiet hotel lobby. N.S. Neve Sinclair. He even named their guilt with their initials. Margot was silent for a few seconds, then said, I'll file an emergency motion with Suffolk County to freeze the account. Once the order's in effect, he won't be able to withdraw, transfer, or hide a single cent. It's all in motion now. I looked out through the hotel's tall lobby windows. Yellow taxis slid by. Boston's sky a soft gray, reflecting back at me like a blank design board. No more old colors. No more pretending. I opened my phone, returned to the Rebranding My Life file, and added a new line at the bottom. Phase 2, Justice. No more fear, only strategy. Just as I hit save, the screen lit up. Margaret Martinez. I picked up, trying to keep my voice calm. Hi, Mom. Her voice was worried but restrained. Angela, I've been calling Waylon all day. Someone at Barrett said he disappeared from meetings. Is something going on? I looked out the window streaked with rain. Yes, Mom. I caught Waylon and Nevier at the office. There's no misunderstanding. I've given the evidence to my lawyer. A long silence followed. Then she spoke, hoarse and slow. I warned him not to lose the woman who understands the true meaning of the word integrity. Perhaps he forgot that integrity isn't found in a financial report. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm sorry you had to hear about this in the worst way. She sighed. No, it's his fault. I hesitated, then chose to speak up about the financial part. Mom, I've noticed some strange transactions. My lawyer suspects Waylon may be setting up independent vehicles to separate assets, a Delaware-type company. Have you heard anything about that from anyone at Barrett? She paused, then replied honestly, I haven't heard anything specific. But there are still people who respect me. I'll see if there's any mention of Delaware filings. or private projects tied to him. I nodded, my voice softening. Thank you. I just need the truth, not anyone to take sides. She answered firmly, gently, You'll have it. And Angela, if you ever need a place to land, this house still has someone who'll open the door. The call ended. I set the phone down, watching the rain streak across the glass. I had lost a husband, but gained a quiet ally on the other side of the line. In the foggy glass, my reflection appeared. No longer someone left behind, but a woman beginning to reclaim control. That night, when I returned to the Focal Point Design Studio, I turned on the lights. The familiar space lit up. White walls, unfinished mood boards, and the faint scent of espresso lingering in the air. This place was once the child Waylon and I built together. He used to call it our second baby. Now, I wasn't sure I wanted to share anything with him anymore, not even memories. On the desk, I saw an old photo frame, taken at our wedding 6 years ago. I was in a white lace gown, and Waylon, in a black tuxedo, beaming, his hand tightly holding mine at the altar. His voice echoed in my memory, clear as if he were still right beside me. I promise to protect you from all the evil in this world. I let out a soft laugh, the kind that tastes more bitter than tears. Now I understood. The evil he once promised to protect me from turned out to be him. I stood, looking around the room. In the corner, the model of the W+A logo, the dual emblem we once used for the studio's brand, still sat in its glass case. 2 letters intertwined with elegant cuts, symbolizing the harmony between you and me. I walked over and took it down. Under the studio's white light, I held a stylus and dragged a line straight through the glass, splitting the logo in 2. The glass cracked, separating the letters. Now, only one half remained on the table, the letter A. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered to myself, better. Finally, the proportions are right. The studio door creaked open. Lena, the young intern, stepped in holding a coffee cup. She froze when she saw me standing there, shards of glass at my feet. Are you okay, ma'am? I looked up, voice calm, eyes still fixed on the remaining logo piece. I'm fine. Just clearing out what no longer fits the current design. She stepped closer, glanced at the A fragment on the table, then asked softly, sincerely, What will you do next? I turned to face her, the calm gaze of someone who had lost everything but found something greater. Herself. Redesign myself. Lena stood still, saying nothing. In that moment, I saw her eyes shimmer, admiration mixed with encouragement. Perhaps she saw in me a future version of herself, a woman who had been knocked down but never stayed on the ground. I bent down, picked up the shard with the letter W, and dropped it in the trash. As it landed with a clink, I knew I had officially stepped over the line between victim and architect of my own life. 3 days later, Lydia sent me an email. The subject line read, Landry's looking for a branding partner. This is your moment. I read it again and again, my heart pounding, as if for the first time in weeks, I had a real reason to rise. Lydia wrote that her company was preparing to rebrand Landry Pharmaceuticals, a major Cambridge-based pharma firm looking for a more creative, human-focused direction. And she had boldly nominated Focal Point Designs. She wrote, You're not just a designer, you're someone with a story. And every strong brand needs someone who understands pain enough to turn it into image. I looked at the screen and smiled softly. Maybe Lydia knew me better than anyone right now. I spent the whole night preparing the biggest pitch of my life, a concept around seamless healing for the pharmaceutical industry. I chose a muted pastel palette and a logo of an almost closed curve, reminiscent of the open circle I had drawn that night at the Liberty Hotel. The next morning, I walked into Landry's headquarters, a cold but refined building of silver blue glass. Standing in the boardroom with 12 directors, I realized this was my rebirth. My voice didn't shake, even if my hands were cold. I began. We don't just design images, we design trust. A pharmaceutical brand doesn't just sell medicine, it sells the belief that people will feel better, be healthier, and be heard. The room fell silent. When I showed the final slide, the open circle symbol with the tagline, "Healing is Connection," I saw Lydia smiling at me from the end of the table, and the marketing director said something that almost made me cry. "This isn't just design, Ms. Martinez. This is a philosophy." As I exited the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Waylon. "I just want to talk." Just once, I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I replied with a single emoji. Paper. A PDF of the divorce papers. Title in bold. Final draft. No explanations. No memories. Just procedures. That evening, I reopened my MacBook at the studio. Golden light reflecting off the now empty desk, where the W+A model used to sit. Only A remained now, and I realized that was enough to define me. I opened a new mood board page and typed at the top, "Design is control." Control your story. The words glowed on the screen like a reminder. I had once lost control in my marriage, but I never lost the skill to redesign anything. If a brand can rebrand to survive, then so can a woman. I took a sip of coffee, eyes looking out onto the Boston night. The city was still bustling, noisy, breathing hard like a heart just restarting. And I knew, so was my life. 2 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Angela, this is Stella, admin manager at Barrett & Company. I think I have something you need to know. Meet me at Tate Bakery, 3:30 p.m. today." I searched her name on LinkedIn to confirm. Stella Grant, 58 years old, had been at Barrett & Company for 26 years. A silent figure who knew every moving part. My gut told me she wouldn't text without a reason. Tate Bakery on Charles Street was as busy as always, filled with the smell of almond pastries and strong coffee. I stepped inside and saw Stella in a corner booth, wearing a beige trench coat, reading glasses perched on her nose. She waved, and I could tell instantly her eyes had seen more than she would say. After a few pleasantries, she slid a small black USB drive onto the table, covering it with a napkin. I know this could cost me my job, but I was once a wife too, and I know the look of a woman who's just been betrayed, just like I was in 1999. I gripped my coffee cup, said nothing. She continued, softly but firmly. "This USB contains a full chain of internal emails, including reports Waylon sent to the audit board. He inflated fund performance to over 30% per year, when in reality it hovered around 7.8%. My stomach tightened, not just because of the numbers, but the cold precision behind the lie. This was no longer about infidelity. This was intentional fraud, and I had been used as the model wife at his lavish fundraising events. Stella added, her eyes fixed on me. "I'm not doing this because I hate him. I'm doing it because I know you don't deserve to be dragged down with him." I nodded, slipped the USB into my purse, and placed my hand gently on hers, squeezing it. "I'm not out for revenge, Stella. I'm going to go public, and let the light handle the rest." We parted with a short hug. Few words, but enough for two women who had walked through betrayal and still stood tall. That night, when I plugged the USB into my computer at the studio, file after file opened like cracks splitting open a wall I once thought was solid. I created a new folder named Transparency and hit save, like a beginning. But I knew saving it wasn't enough. The truth, for it to matter, must be seen. That evening, I sat in the studio, desk light casting down, and called Rowan Lee, the AV technician who handled internal events at Barrett & Company. We had collaborated a few times on product pitches. I knew he was discreet, but perceptive enough to know who could be trusted. "Rowan, I need you to help me cut a video for an upcoming meeting," I said calmly. "The input files are financial charts, emails, and a few clips. Format it like the quarterly internal videos you usually make. Only this time, I'll be handling the visual design. 3 days later, Rowan and I sat in the editing room in front of a large screen. The 4-minute video opened with the Barrett and Company logo, fading into footage of Waylon, polished, confident, speaking at a roadshow. Immediately after, the screen overlaid an email he had sent to the audit board, subject line, Q4 return adjustments, internal only. It was followed by falsified investment graphs and footage of Neva A. and Waylon having dinner at the thank you dinner, taken from the company's own event reel. I styled everything with a sleek branding aesthetic, like a high-end corporate campaign, because I understood one thing deeply: the truth gets ignored if it's not told beautifully. Rowan was silent for a long while after the playback ended. Then he nodded. I'll insert the video into the internal loop for Tuesday morning. Just send me the final file in the right format, I thanked him. On the way home, I received a call from Margot. Her voice carried an edge of concern. Angela, I know you want to expose everything, but if you show that video publicly at their shareholder meeting, they could sue for NDA violation, maybe even defamation. I looked out at the Boston streets, soft rain falling, and replied, if they sue, I'll call it an urgent campaign on corporate ethics. I'm a brand designer. It's time I redesigned their real identity. Margot sighed. Just remember, you're not destroying something. You're restructuring the truth, I smiled. And this time, the structure won't include the letter W. That morning, I applied my makeup carefully, chose a simple black dress with a high collar, not glamorous, but sharp enough to make clear I wasn't there to bow. Around my neck was a fine silver necklace, engraved with the words, Tell the truth beautifully. That evening, the Fairmont Copley Plaza shimmered under candlelight, white-draped banquet tables, champagne flutes raised amid soft classical strings. Barrett and Company's year-end gala drew over 200 guests, investors, partners, financial media. All waited for the keynote speech by Waylon Martinez, the firm's brightest star. He stepped onto the stage in a deep navy tuxedo, flashing that handsome smile I once believed was genuine. The microphone rang out. 2023 was a year of resilience and breakthrough. We achieved 30% growth, far beyond all projections. And I have only one word to describe how I feel. Proud applause erupted like fireworks, until the screen behind him flickered. The next slide appeared. Actual ROI, 7.8%. Claimed 30%. A single second of silence. Then murmurs rippled through the hall like a wave. Waylon turned, face draining of color, frantically glancing at the controls. But I had already risen, walking toward the stage, each step as steady as if I were on a runway in the middle of a brand campaign. I took the mic. Apologies for the interruption, but I believe the truth also deserves its own stage. I paused, looked at Waylon, then turned to the front row, where the firm's top investors now sat in visible confusion. This isn't a lesson about marriage. This is a lesson about honesty. The screen shifted to an email clip. From Waylon Martinez. Subject ROI adjustments. Internal use. Followed by internal charts, data edits, and the line. Push to 30%, we need optics. I turned back to the audience. I'm Waylon's wife. But tonight, I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a citizen and a brand designer who believes brands are built on truth. I paused, took a breath, and continued. I've submitted all documents to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and Barrett and Company's Ethics Committee through my attorney, Margot Palmer. Below me, Waylon was muttering something unintelligible, eyes wide with panic. Nevi stood behind him, pale, head bowed, then quickly exited the hall. I gave Waylon one last look, then raised the remote to reveal the final slide. An image of the divorce draft, annotated with a single, devastating line. Integrity is a luxury I can afford. I stepped down from the stage. No applause. But it was the heaviest silence I had ever earned, and I knew I had reclaimed my own story. I walked off the stage, not trembling, only calm, like I had just wrapped the most important presentation of my life. Behind me, the ballroom remained frozen, as if everyone was still processing what they had just witnessed. Then, a round of applause broke out, scattered at first, then growing. But not from the suited men in the front rows. It came from the young women in work dresses, those who had once bowed their heads in front of the same power structures I had. They stood, not loudly, just quietly clapping, their eyes reflecting something close to gratitude. I didn't bow. I turned and walked away, down the marble aisle, my dress sweeping softly behind me, clearing the path for myself. Outside the hall, Edison Mercer, managing director of Grayline Capital, a man who had competed with Whalen in several M&A deals, approached, holding an untouched glass of wine. He looked at me, his eyes sharp but not judgmental, then gave a slight nod. "You just redesigned your entire life, on their stage." I smiled. The first smile in months that wasn't out of politeness or endurance. "And this time," I said, gripping the black clutch that held my SEC files, "I won't need to draft it again." 6 months later, the name Whalen Martinez appeared regularly on the morning news, no longer accompanied by praise. The SEC issued a temporary suspension and launched a full investigation into fraudulent earnings reports and fund mismanagement. Barrett and Company lost over 30% of its portfolio value in the first quarter alone, with a wave of clients pulling out, and the media dubbed it Beacon Street's ethical collapse. Neviche, who once was my best friend, was dismissed quietly, without notice. Those who once defended her now refused to mention her name in any meeting. I heard she moved to Philadelphia and took a low-ranking job at a new financial firm, one known for strict standards on financial transparency and professional ethics, ironically, the very things she once ignored. As for me, I rented a small studio in Boston's South End, nestled among red brick streets, near the artisan sandwich shop I frequented back in my student days. I no longer worked in the shadows of nameless projects. I launched a personal exhibition titled The Design of Healing. The space was pure white, displaying fragmented design pieces, drafts, shattered logos, crossed-out typography, all strung along metal wires like a timeline of a soul once patched together. In the center of the room, a suspended silver steel circle, the freedom symbol I had first sketched in that hotel room at Liberty. I stood in a corner of the room, wearing a cream linen dress, holding a glass of celery juice. A guest approached, looked at the symbol, and asked, "Did you design this out of pain?" I smiled. "No, I designed it out of survival." I didn't choose silence as my ending. 7 weeks after the lawsuit and divorce, a portion of the settlement I received, not much, but enough, was used to establish the Integrity Award Scholarship Fund, specifically for female students pursuing brand design at the Massachusetts College of Art. I wanted to create opportunities for young talents with passion but no backing, just as I once had nothing but an old MacBook and a belief in honesty. On the day we launched the foundation space at a community library in Back Bay, I invited Margaret Martinez, Whalen's mother. I wasn't sure she would come, but while I was adjusting the ribbon on the poster, she walked in, wrapped in a classic wool coat, silver hair pinned neatly, her eyes revealing quiet gratitude. She hugged me, the kind of embrace that made up for all the years she stayed silent. "Thank you for teaching my son the lesson I couldn't." I didn't reply. I simply squeezed her hand. It was an evening that needed no more words. At the same time, Focal Point Designs, the company I founded, became an official partner of Landry Pharmaceuticals, along with 2 other major brands in healthcare and consumer tech. We didn't run loud ads. We told stories, through visuals, through color, through values that can't be faked. A month later, the Boston Globe published a feature titled Focal Point, a symbol of creative rebirth in the heart of the city. They weren't just talking about me. They were talking about the revival of trust, transparency, and women who chose not revenge, but to redesign themselves. I once thought design was only about color, layout, and font. But after everything, I realized design is how we retell our story when others have tried to distort it. And that's why I launched a podcast on YouTube called The Fine Line. A simple name, but layered with meaning. The line between love and manipulation, between patience and self-destruction, between sacrifice and losing oneself. In the first few episodes, I spoke about how to spot the signs of betrayal in relationships, not through words, but through behavior, eye contact, subtle changes. I analyzed them the way a designer studies a color palette: warm, cool, neutral, and offered ways women could reestablish their own identity systems. I didn't expect it, but the first video reached over 2 million views within weeks. In the comments, thousands of women, mostly aged 30 to 60, shared their stories. Messages of thanks, tears written in words, and even notes like, "I'm in a hotel room right now, just like you were at Liberty. Thank you for making me feel less crazy." One comment made me sit still for minutes, then laugh through tears. "You turned pain into a brand. I want to learn how to do that." I touched the open circle logo on my laptop shell, and for the first time in a long while, I felt freedom wasn't just an abstract word. It was a real design, one I had made myself. That morning, Boston woke up in a soft mist, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of my South End studio, reflecting off the wall where my mood board hung, now filled with concepts for a new campaign. Branding begins within. On my desk, I found a bouquet of white hydrangeas, the flower I once used in my very first logo. The card attached was written in dark blue ink, the handwriting familiar. "To the woman who redesigned truth. Edison Mercer." I smiled. Not because of the compliment, but because someone saw what I had truly tried to do: redesign the truth, with grace, strength, and ethics. I brewed a cup of black coffee, stood before the window. In the distance, the city was waking, person by person, story by story, choice by choice. And in that moment, my voice rose gently, like the closing voiceover on my YouTube podcast. In design, every mistake can be corrected. In life, too, if we're brave enough to begin again. I was no longer part of Waylon's story. I was my own. And this time, I was the designer. If you've ever been dismissed, deceived, or forced to start over with no one beside you, know this: you can still redesign your life at any age. Share your story in the comments, because maybe another woman out there needs to read it today. If this story resonated with you, please like and don't forget to subscribe to be the first to hear the next chapter.